Paco.
Mama's dying. The words tore through the frozen night like a rifle shot. Caleb Stone hadn't opened his door in 5 years. Not for neighbors, not for preachers, not for anyone. But when he heard that voice, small, desperate, breaking his hand, was already on the latch. A little girl stood in the snow barefoot, shaking her lips blue. Behind her, nothing but darkness and the howling wind. "Please, mister," she whispered. "Mama fell. She can't get up. The baby's coming." And just like that, every lantern in his dead heart flickered back to life. If you want to know what happens next, hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment below telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's ride. Silverbrook, Montana Territory, January 1887. Caleb Stone sat alone in the dark. He didn't light candles anymore. Didn't see the point. The shadows kept him company well enough, and they didn't ask questions he couldn't answer. 5 years. 5 winters since the fire took everything. Hannah, Samuel. Gone in one terrible night while he was 20 miles away delivering horses to a ranch that didn't matter anymore. He came home to ashes, to 2 small graves he dug with his own bleeding hands. Since then, Caleb had become a ghost living in a ghost's house. The cabin stood at the edge of Silverbrook up on Miller's Ridge, where nobody bothered to climb unless they had business with the dead. And Caleb Stone, as far as the town was concerned, was as good as dead. He poured himself whiskey, didn't drink it, just stared at the amber liquid catching what little moonlight slipped through the frost-covered window. Outside, the blizzard screamed. They called it the worst winter in 40 years. Snow piled higher than wagon wheels. Cattle froze standing up. Folks who ventured out past sunset didn't always come back. Caleb didn't care much. Let the cold take him if it wanted. He was tired of fighting. Then came the knock. Thud, thud, thud. He blinked. Must be the wind. Thud, thud, thud. No. That was a fist. Small but desperate. Caleb pushed himself up slowly, joints cracking like old timber. He hadn't moved with purpose in so long that his body had forgotten how. He crossed to the door, hesitated. His hand trembled on the iron latch, not from cold, but from something older. Something he'd buried with his wife and son. He opened it. The wind hit him first sharp as a knife. Then he looked down. A little girl stood on his porch. 6 years old, maybe 7. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves tangled and crusted with ice. Her dress was thin, too thin, and her feet were bare, turning purple in the snow. But her eyes burned with something that stopped Caleb's breath. Not fear, not panic, determination. "Please, mister," she said, voice cracking but steady. "My mama fell. She's hurt real bad. The baby's coming and she can't get up, and I didn't know where else to go, and I saw your cabin had walls and—" "Slow down!" Caleb crouched, bringing himself to her level. "Where's your mama?" "Down by the river, past the old mill." The girl's whole body shook, but she didn't cry. "She told me to run, told me to find help. I ran as fast as I could, mister, I swear I did, but the snow was so deep and I couldn't—" "How long ago?" "I don't know. A long time. Too long." Caleb's chest tightened. The river was half a mile away. In this storm, with a child's legs, that could have been an hour, maybe more. A pregnant woman alone in the snow for an hour. He knew what that meant. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lucy. Lucy Whitmore." Caleb nodded once. He grabbed his coat from the hook, the heavy buffalo hide one he hadn't worn since before the fire, and wrapped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her whole. "Lucy, I need you to listen to me real careful. Can you do that?" She nodded, teeth chattering. "I'm gonna find your mama. But first, I need to get you warm." "No." Lucy grabbed his sleeve with frozen fingers. "We have to go now. She was bleeding, mister. I saw it in the snow. Red all over. Please, we have to. And you won't do her any good if you freeze to death before we get there." His voice was gruff, but not unkind. 2 minutes. Let me get you by the fire. Grab what I need, and then we go. Together. Understand?" Lucy stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Caleb lifted her. She weighed nothing light as a bundle of kindling, and carried her inside. He set her on the chair closest to the hearth and threw 2 logs into the dying embers. They caught quickly, flames leaping up. "Stay here," he said. "But 2 minutes, I promise." He moved fast, faster than he'd moved in years. From the chest in the corner, he pulled rope, a knife, clean rags. From the shelf above the stove, he grabbed the bottle of carbolic acid the doctor had left years ago. From beneath his bed, he retrieved the old lantern, Hannah's lantern, the one she used to hang on the porch when she waited for him to come home. He hadn't touched it since the funeral. His hands shook as he filled it with oil. The match struck. The wick caught. Golden light spilled across the floor, and for a moment Caleb couldn't breathe. Not now. Not now. He forced the memories down. Buried them where they belonged. When he turned back, Lucy was watching him. Those big brown eyes saw too much for a child. "You lost someone," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't answer. He just held out his hand. "Let's go get your mama." The storm tried to kill them twice on the way down. First, a gust of wind hit so hard it knocked Lucy off her feet. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, tucked her against his chest, and kept walking. Second, the path along the ridge gave way beneath them, snow hiding a 3-foot drop. Caleb twisted as they fell, taking the impact on his shoulder so Lucy wouldn't be hurt. He got up, kept moving. Lucy clung to his neck, one small arm wrapped tight. The other hand held the lantern he'd given her, held it like it was the most precious thing in the world. "That way," she said, pointing through the white chaos. "I remember that tree, the one that looks like a hand." Caleb squinted, saw it. A twisted pine with 5 branches reaching up like frozen fingers. "Good girl, hold on." He pushed forward, each step a battle against thigh-deep snow. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he didn't stop. He couldn't, because somewhere ahead a woman was dying, and for the first time in 5 years, Caleb Stone had a reason to keep breathing. They found her in a hollow beside the river. Clara Whitmore lay crumpled in the snow, her dark red hair spread across the white like spilled wine. One hand clutched her swollen belly. The other had clawed at the frozen ground, trying to drag herself forward. She wasn't moving. "Mama!" Lucy scrambled out of Caleb's arms and fell to her knees beside her mother. "Mama! Wake up! I found help! I found him! Mama! Please!" Caleb dropped beside Clara, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse. Faint, but there. "She's alive," he said. "Lucy, I need you to keep talking to her. Don't stop. You hear me? Don't let her slip away." "Yes, sir." Lucy grabbed her mother's cold hand and pressed it to her cheek. "Mama, I'm here. Mr. What's your name, mister?" "Caleb. Caleb Stone." "Mr. Caleb found me, Mama. He's gonna help. You just gotta hold on. Okay, just hold on." Caleb worked quickly, assessing the situation. Clara's dress was soaked with blood around her thighs. Her skin was ice-cold, lips, blue breath, shallow. But it was her belly that worried him most. It was contracting. Hard. Too soon. The baby was coming at least a month too soon, and out here in the storm, that meant death for both of them. "Ma'am?" Caleb leaned close, speaking directly into Clara's ear. "Clara, I need you to open your eyes. Can you do that for me?" Her eyelids fluttered, then opened just barely. Green eyes met gray. "Who?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the wind. Name's Caleb Stone. Your daughter found me. I'm gonna get you somewhere safe, but I need you to stay with me. You understand? Clara's gaze drifted to Lucy. Something flickered in her face, relief maybe. Or fear. The baby, she rasped. Something's wrong. It's too early. I felt it tear. Inside. Something tore. I know. Caleb kept his voice calm, even though his heart was pounding. But you ain't dying tonight. Neither is your child. I won't allow it. She stared at him. Then impossibly she laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You don't get to decide that. Watch me. He stripped off his coat and wrapped it around her belly, securing it with his belt. Then he gathered her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. She cried out a sharp animal sound of pain. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. But we have to move. Lucy, stay close. Don't let go of that lantern. Yes, sir. They began the long walk back. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she would moan, her fingers digging into Caleb's shirt as another contraction ripped through her. Sometimes she would go limp, so still that he had to put his ear to her lips to make sure she was still breathing. Lucy walked beside them, holding the lantern high. She didn't complain about the cold, didn't cry about her frozen feet. She just kept talking, kept telling her mother about the nice man's cabin, about the fire waiting for them, about how everything was going to be okay. Caleb had never seen courage like that in a child. It reminded him of Samuel. Not now. He pushed the thought away and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The cabin came into view like a dream, dark against the white storm, but solid. Real. Almost there, he told Lucy. Almost there. He kicked open the door and carried Clara inside, laying her on the kitchen table. It was the cleanest surface he had, the only place with enough room. Lucy rushed to build up the fire while Caleb grabbed every blanket he could find. Hot water, he said. There's a kettle by the stove. Fill it from the barrel in the corner. Can you do that? Yes, sir. She moved without hesitation, following his instructions with the focus of someone twice her age. Caleb turned back to Clara. Her eyes were open now, wide with pain and fear. Her hands gripped the edges of the table like she was trying to anchor herself to the world. It's coming, she gasped. God help me, it's coming. I know. Caleb rolled up his sleeves and washed his hands in the cold water from the bucket. I'm gonna need you to trust me, Clara. Can you do that? I don't even know you. No, you don't. But I'm all you've got right now. And I swear to you. He leaned close, holding her gaze. I swear on everything I've lost, I will not let you die tonight. Not you. Not your baby. Not while I'm breathing. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Why? She whispered. Why do you care? Caleb didn't answer right away. He thought about Hannah, about Samuel, about the 2 graves on the hillside that he visited every morning before dawn. Because I couldn't save them, he said finally. But maybe I can save you. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I trust you. Another contraction hit. Clara screamed a raw, primal sound that filled the cabin. Lucy ran to her mother's side, taking her hand. I'm here, Mama. I'm right here. You're gonna be okay, Mr. Caleb promised. Caleb positioned himself and took a deep breath. You can do this. You have to do this. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, a single lantern burned. And Caleb Stone, the man who had given up on life, on hope, on everything, prepared to fight for both. The hours that followed were the longest of Caleb's life. Clara's labor was difficult, wrong. The baby was positioned badly, and there was too much blood, far too much. Every few minutes Clara would scream and Caleb would work and Lucy would hold her mother's hand and whisper words of comfort. You're doing so good, Mama. You're so strong. Just a little more. Just a little. Caleb's hands were steady, but his heart was chaos. Please, please let me save them. He didn't know who he was praying to. He'd stopped believing in God the night he came home to ashes. But now, in this small cabin with 2 lives hanging in the balance, he found himself reaching for something, anything bigger than himself. I can't, Clara sobbed. I can't do this. It hurts too much. I can't. You can. Caleb's voice was firm. You walked through a blizzard, 8 months pregnant. You raised that little girl by yourself. You survived things that would have broken most people. You are stronger than you know, Clara Whitmore. Now push. She pushed, and pushed, and pushed. The clock on the wall had long since stopped, but Caleb guessed it was near dawn when he finally heard it. A cry, small, weak, but unmistakable. The cry of a newborn baby. Caleb held the infant in his shaking hands, a tiny boy, red-faced and squalling, so fragile it seemed impossible he could survive. But he was alive. Alive. A boy. Caleb said, his voice cracking. You have a son, Clara. Clara collapsed back onto the table, laughing and crying at the same time. Lucy climbed up beside her, eyes wide with wonder. He's so small, she whispered. Is he okay? Caleb cleaned the baby quickly, checked his fingers, his toes, his breathing. Everything seemed right. Everything seemed perfect. He's perfect, he said. He wrapped the infant in the only clean cloth he had, left a soft flannel blanket that had belonged to Samuel, the one he'd kept in the chest for 5 years, unable to give away, unable to burn. The one he'd sworn no other child would ever touch. But as he placed the baby in Clara's arms, as he watched her face transform with love, he knew it was exactly where the blanket belonged. Thank you, Clara whispered, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Caleb Stone. You saved us. Caleb said nothing. He couldn't. Because for the first time in 5 years he was crying. Not for the past. For the miracle that had just been born in his kitchen. Morning came slow and gray. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a world of white silence. Caleb stood at the window, watching the first pale light creep across the frozen land. Behind him, Clara slept on the bed he'd given up for her, the baby nestled against her chest. Lucy was curled at her mother's feet, like a loyal hound, one small hand still clutching Clara's dress. He should be exhausted. He was exhausted. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, he watched the sunrise and thought about the 2 graves on the hillside. Hannah, Samuel. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if you're out there somewhere or if you're just gone. But I want you to know something. I think I understand now. Why I survived that night. Why you were taken and I was left behind. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't cruelty. It was so I could be here, tonight, for them. He closed his eyes. I'll never forget you, either of you. But I think it's time I started living again. Behind him, Lucy stirred. She blinked awake, rubbed her eyes, and spotted Caleb by the window. Mr. Caleb. Mornin', sweetheart. She climbed off the bed, carefully trying not to wake her mother, and padded over to him on bare feet. Is the storm over? Looks like it. She stood beside him, staring out at the snow-covered world. Then, without a word, she slipped her small hand into his. Caleb flinched. He hadn't held a child's hand since Don't. He forced himself to breathe, to stay present. And slowly, gently, he closed his fingers around hers. They stood there together, watching the sun rise over Silverbrook. Mr. Caleb. Yeah. Thank you for saving my mama. And my baby brother. You saved them, Lucy. You ran through that storm when anyone else would have given up. You found help when there was no help to find. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Lucy looked up at him with those big brown eyes. I was really scared, she admitted quietly. The whole time. I was so scared. That's what makes it brave. He crouched down to meet her gaze. Being brave ain't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. You understand? She nodded slowly. Then she hugged him. It was sudden and fierce, her thin arms wrapping around his neck, her face pressed against his shoulder. Caleb froze. It had been so long since anyone had held him, so long since he'd let himself be held. But slowly, carefully, he put his arms around her, and he held on. The hug lasted longer than Caleb expected. When Lucy finally pulled back, she wiped her nose with her sleeve and looked up at him with something new in her eyes. Trust. The kind that couldn't be earned with words, only with actions. "I'm hungry," she said simply. Caleb almost laughed. After everything, the storm, the terror, the miracle, this child's first concern was breakfast. There was something beautifully ordinary about it. Something healing. "Let's see what I can find." He led her to the kitchen, moving quietly so as not to wake Clara and the baby. His supplies were meager. He hadn't been to town in weeks, but he managed to scrape together some dried biscuits, a jar of honey, and a tin of preserved peaches. Lucy ate like she hadn't seen food in days. Maybe she hadn't. "When's the last time you ate, sweetheart?" She paused mid-bite, thinking. "Yesterday morning. Mama gave me her biscuit. Said she wasn't hungry." Caleb's jaw tightened. A pregnant woman giving away her food to feed her child, walking through a blizzard with nothing in her stomach. "Your mama's a good woman." "The best." Lucy licked honey off her fingers. "Papa used to say she was too good for him. That's why God gave her to him anyway, to make him better." "Your papa sounds like a wise man." Lucy's face fell. "He died, in the mines, 6 months ago." Caleb nodded slowly. He understood loss too well to offer empty comfort. "I'm sorry." Mama cried for a whole week. Then she stopped crying and started working. Said we had to keep moving forward. Said Papa would want that. "She's right." "I know." Lucy reached for another peach slice. "But sometimes I hear her crying at night. When she thinks I'm asleep. She tries to be quiet, but I hear her anyway." Caleb didn't respond. What could he say? He knew those midnight tears. He'd shed enough of them himself. From the other room came a soft sound, the mewling cry of a newborn. Lucy's face lit up. "He's awake!" She scrambled off her chair and ran toward her mother, bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. Caleb followed more slowly, giving them space. Clara was sitting up in bed, the baby cradled against her chest. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, skin still pale, but there was color in her cheeks now. Life. "Good morning, little man," Lucy whispered, climbing onto the bed beside her mother. "I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything. How to catch frogs and skip rocks and climb trees and maybe wait until he can walk first," Clara said with a tired smile. "Fine, but I'm teaching him soon as he can." Clara looked up and saw Caleb standing in the doorway. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. An understanding that went deeper than words. "Mr. Stone." "Ma'am. I don't know how to thank you. What you did last night." "You don't need to thank me." He shifted uncomfortably. Praise had never sat well with him even before the fire. "Lucy's the one who saved you. I just helped." Clara shook her head. "You did more than help. You brought us back from the dead." "That might be a bit dramatic." "Is it?" She held his gaze. "I felt myself slipping away last night. I felt the cold taking me and I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. In the snow alone with my daughter watching me die." Her voice cracked and she paused to steady herself. "But then you were there. This stranger in the dark, carrying me through the storm like I weighed nothing. And when you looked at me when you said you wouldn't let me die, I believed you. I don't know why. I don't know how. But I believed you." Caleb didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Clara continued softer now. Lucy told me about the blanket, the one you wrapped the baby in. She said it belonged to your son. His whole body went rigid. I'm sorry, Clara said quickly. I shouldn't have. It's fine. The words came out harsher than he intended. He took a breath, forced his shoulders to relax. It was Samuel's. My boy. He died 5 years ago. Him and his mama both. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. I'm so sorry. So am I. He looked at the baby in her arms, small, perfect, alive. But that blanket's been sitting in a chest for half a decade doing nothing for nobody. Samuel would have wanted it used. He was generous that way, always giving away his toys to kids who had less. How old was he? 4. Just turned 4 3 weeks before. He couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Clara nodded slowly. What was he like? No one had asked Caleb that question in 5 years. People in town avoided mentioning Samuel like his name was something shameful, like grief was contagious. But Clara asked, and somehow Caleb found himself answering. He was fearless. Couldn't keep him out of trouble if I tried. Always climbing things, chasing things, picking up snakes and spiders like they were puppies. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Hannah, my wife, she used to say he aged her 10 years every day. But she loved him something fierce. We both did. He sounds wonderful. He was. Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. He was everything. Silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with shared understanding. Two people who had lost too much, standing on opposite sides of grief. Lucy broke the moment. Mama, can we stay here just for a little while, until you're better? Clara looked at Caleb, question in her eyes. You can stay as long as you need, he said before she could ask. Storm's passed, but the snow's too deep for travel. Roads won't be clear for a week at least, and you're in no condition to go anywhere. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. I've got room, food enough for all of us. And truth be told, he paused, choosing his words carefully. It's been a long time since this house had any life in it. Might do it some good. Clara studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Thank you, Mr. Stone, for everything. Call me Caleb. Then call me Clara. He nodded once, then turned to leave. I'll make some proper breakfast. Rest while you can. As he walked back to the kitchen, he heard Lucy's voice behind him, high and clear. I like him, Mama. He's sad, but he's nice. Yes, baby, Clara murmured. I think he is. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Caleb rose before dawn as he always had, but now instead of sitting alone in the dark, he lit the stove and put coffee on to boil. He chopped wood, checked on the horses in the barn, cleared snow from the paths, all the work he'd let slide during his years of isolation. Clara grew stronger each day. By the 3rd morning, she insisted on getting out of bed despite Caleb's protests. By the 5th, she was helping with meals, her movements slow but determined. You should be resting, Caleb told her for the 10th time. I've rested enough. She stirred the pot of stew she'd made from the rabbit he'd caught that morning. Idle hands make me nervous. You just gave birth in a blizzard. I think you've earned some idle time. She smiled a real smile, the first he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, chasing away the shadows. My husband used to say the same thing. Clara, sit down. Clara, rest. Clara, you're gonna work yourself into an early grave. Sounds like a sensible man. He was, most of the time. Her smile faded slightly. He was a good man, Caleb. Not perfect, but good. He worked himself to death in those mines trying to give us a better life. And now... She trailed off, staring into the pot. Now you're here, Caleb finished. In a stranger's cabin with 2 children and nothing to your name. Clara flinched at the bluntness. Then she laughed, a surprised, genuine sound. You don't sugarcoat things, do you? Never saw the point. Neither did Thomas. He used to say pretty words were for politicians and snake oil salesmen. She wiped her hands on her apron. I don't know what happens next, Caleb. I don't have a home anymore. Sold it to pay Thomas's debts. I was heading to Silverbrook hoping to find work, maybe a room to rent when the storm hit. What kind of work? I was a school teacher. Before I married. I'm hoping someone in town might need. Silverbrook doesn't have a school teacher. Clara looked up sharply. It doesn't. Had 1 years back. Old Mrs. Henley. She passed on 3 winters ago. Kids been getting their learning from their parents since then. Which is to say, they ain't getting much learning at all. Something flickered in Clara's eyes. Hope, maybe. Possibility. You think they'd hire me? Don't see why not. Town council's been talking about finding a new teacher for years. Just haven't gotten around to it. I'd need references. Letters from my previous position. I don't have any of that anymore. It all burned when... She stopped herself. Took a breath. There was a fire. At our house in Helena, last month. We lost everything. That's why I was traveling in this weather. Had nowhere else to go. Caleb understood now. The thin dress. The bare feet. The desperation in Lucy's eyes when she'd knocked on his door. They hadn't just been caught in a storm. They'd been running from disaster to disaster, clinging to hope by their fingernails. I'll vouch for you, he said. Clara blinked. What? To the town council? I'll tell them you're a teacher, a good one, that I've seen you with Lucy, the way you explain things, the patience you have. That's worth more than any letter from some fancy school back east. Caleb, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Why, you barely know me. I know enough. He held her gaze. I know you walked through hell to keep your daughter safe. I know you gave up your own food so she could eat. I know you fought to stay alive last week when your body was ready to give up. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She turned away quickly, pretending to focus on the stew. You're a strange man, Caleb Stone. So I've been told. Strange in a good way, she added softly. In a very good way. Neither of them spoke for a while. The cabin filled with the smell of cooking food, the crackle of the fire, the distant sounds of Lucy playing with the baby in the other room. It felt, Caleb realized with a start, like home. Not just a house where he slept, not just walls and a roof, but an actual home with warmth and voices and life. He wasn't sure how to feel about that. A week after the storm, Caleb made the trip into town. He needed supplies, real supplies, not the scraps he'd been living on. And Clara needed things for the baby. Clothes, diapers, a proper cradle. The snow had melted enough to make the road passable, though it was still slow going. His horse, a stubborn gray mare named Pepper, picked her way carefully down the ridge. Silverbrook appeared below him like a painting, a small cluster of buildings around a single main street, smoke rising from chimneys, people moving between shops. It looked peaceful, ordinary. Caleb knew better. He'd avoided town for 5 years for a reason. The whispers, the stares, the way people looked at him like he was something broken, something dangerous. Poor Caleb Stone, lost his whole family, living up there alone like a hermit. Ain't right, that. Ain't natural. He tied Pepper outside the general store and stepped inside. The conversation stopped immediately. 3 women stood near the fabric section, their heads bent together. Old Pete Morrison sat by the stove, whittling a piece of wood. Behind the counter stood Hector Bowen, the owner, a thick-set man with a red face and small, calculating eyes. Everyone stared. Well, well, Hector said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. Caleb Stone, haven't seen you in months. Figured you'd finally frozen to death up on that ridge. Not yet. What brings you down to civilization? Supplies. Caleb pulled a list from his pocket. Flour, salt, coffee, some fabric for baby clothes, and whatever you've got for diapers. The silence grew thicker. Baby clothes. Hector raised an eyebrow. You adopting orphans now? Got some guests, woman and her children. They got caught in the storm. Been staying with me while she recovers. A woman. Hector's smile widened. At your place. Alone. With her 2 children. Right. Hector made a show of gathering supplies, moving slowly, deliberately. Heard some talk about that. Ryder came through yesterday, said he saw smoke coming from your chimney for the first time in years. Said there was a woman hanging laundry on your porch. News travels fast. Small town. Hector shrugged. Not much else to talk about, especially when it's interesting news. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like they were sharing secrets. Word is she's a widow, pretty thing, 8 months pregnant when she stumbled onto your property. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. What's your point, Hector? No point, just making conversation. But his eyes glittered with something ugly. Must be nice, though, having a woman around again. Someone to warm the bed on these cold nights. The words hung in the air like poison. Caleb moved fast. One moment he was standing by the counter. The next he had Hector by the collar, dragging him halfway across the wood. You want to say that again? Hector's face went pale. You were just insulting a good woman who nearly died in a blizzard. A widow with 2 children who's been through more in 6 months than you'll face in your whole comfortable life. Caleb's voice was low, deadly calm. I won't hear it. Not from you. Not from anyone. Understand? Hector nodded frantically. Caleb released him, straightening his coat like nothing had happened. Now, get me my supplies. And add a cradle if you've got one. I'll pay double. Hector scrambled to comply, his hands shaking. The women by the fabric section watched with wide eyes. Old Pete Morrison had stopped whittling his knife, frozen mid-stroke. No one said a word. Caleb paid for his goods, loaded them onto Pepper, and rode out of town without looking back. But he knew this wasn't over. Hector Bowen wasn't the type to forget a humiliation. He'd find a way to make trouble. People like him always did. Clara was waiting on the porch when he returned. She'd wrapped herself in an old blanket, the baby bundled against her chest. Lucy played in the snow nearby, building a lopsided snowman with twigs for arms. You're back early, Clara said. I expected you'd be gone all day. Got what I needed. He dismounted and began unloading the supplies. Town's the same as ever. Small, boring. Full of people with nothing better to do than gossip. Clara's expression shifted. Gossip about what? Caleb hesitated. He didn't want to burden her with Hector's ugliness. But she deserved to know what they were facing. About you. About us. Ah. She nodded slowly, unsurprised. I figured as much. They're saying things. Things that aren't true. Things that aren't kind. Let me guess. Clara's voice was flat, resigned. A widow living with a man who isn't her husband. Convenient timing, them finding each other just as the baby arrives. Must be something improper going on. Something like that. It's always like that. She laughed bitterly. When Thomas died, the vultures circled before his body was cold. Men offering their condolences, wanting to know if I needed help, hinting that a woman alone couldn't possibly survive without a man's protection. Was Hector Bowen one of them? Clara's face hardened. How did you know? Lucky guess. He was the worst of them. Showed up at my door 2 weeks after the funeral offering to take care of me, like I was some stray dog that needed a new owner. Her hands tightened on the blanket. When I refused, he got angry. Said I'd regret it. Said a woman in my position couldn't afford to be choosy. Caleb's blood ran cold. Did he hurt you? No. But he made sure I knew he could. He owned the general store in Helena too. After I turned him down, suddenly no one would sell me supplies. No one would hire me for work. It was like I'd been marked. That's why you left. Part of it. The fire was the rest. She paused. I never could prove it was him. But the timing. 2 days after I told him I was leaving town, my house burns down. My husband's tools, my daughter's toys, everything we owned. Jesus. So yes, Caleb. She met his eyes. I know what gossip can do. I know how cruel people can be. And I know that staying here is putting you in the middle of something ugly. I don't care about ugly. You should. You have a life here, a reputation, such as it is. I have a cabin and some horses. That's not a life. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. What I have now, you Lucy the baby, that's more life than I've felt in 5 years. I'm not giving that up because some small-minded fool wants to run his mouth. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes searched his face, looking for something, doubt maybe, or calculation. She found neither. You mean that, she said quietly. You actually mean that. I don't say things I don't mean. No. A small smile crossed her face. I'm starting to see that. Lucy came running up, cheeks flushed with cold. Mr. Caleb, come see my snowman. I gave him a beard like yours. Caleb looked at the lopsided figure in the yard. It had a crooked nose made of a pine cone and what appeared to be dried grass stuck to its chin. That's supposed to be me. Mama said you're grumpy like a snowman, cold on the outside but nice in the middle. Clara coughed, looking anywhere but at Caleb. Did she now? Uh-huh. She also said you have pretty eyes, but I don't know what that means. Lucy! Clara's face turned bright red. That's enough. Go inside and wash up for dinner. But now. Lucy scampered off, giggling. Clara buried her face in her hands. Children, she muttered. They repeat everything. Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the fire inside. Pretty eyes, huh? Don't. I'm just saying, that's high praise coming from a woman with standards. Clara peeked through her fingers. I'm going to kill her. No, you're not. You love her too much. Right now, that's debatable. Caleb laughed. The sound surprised him, rusty, unpracticed, but real. Clara looked up startled, then smiled. I didn't know you could do that. Do what? Laugh. He considered that. Neither did I. They stood there in the fading light snow sparkling around them, the baby cooing softly against Clara's chest. For a moment everything was still. Everything was perfect. Then Clara spoke, her voice soft. Caleb. Yeah. Thank you. For standing up for me in town. For not caring what they say. Nothing to thank me for. There's everything to thank you for. She reached out and touched his arm, just a brief contact, barely a second. You're a good man. Whatever happened before, whatever you blame yourself for, you're good. I hope you know that. He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and turned to bring the supplies inside. But he carried her words with him, held them close like a lantern against the dark. That night after dinner, they sat together by the fire. Lucy had fallen asleep on the rug, worn out from playing in the snow. The baby was nursing quietly in Clara's arms. Caleb sat in his old chair staring at the flames. Can I ask you something? Clara said. Depends on what it is. The lanterns. The ones you lit the night you found us. She hesitated. Lucy said you hadn't lit them in years, said the cabin was always dark when she first saw it. But that night, every lantern was burning. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I used to light them for Hannah, he finally said. Every night I'd hang one on the porch so she could see the way home if she was out late. Silly thing, maybe, but it made her smile. That's not silly, that's beautiful. After she died, I couldn't bear to light them. They reminded me of everything I'd lost. So I let them go dark. Let myself go dark too. What changed? He looked at her, really looked at her, holding her gaze. Lucy knocked on my door. Clara's breath caught. She was standing there in the snow, freezing and scared, asking for help. And something in me just woke up. Like a part of me that had been sleeping for 5 years suddenly opened its eyes. "So you lit the lanterns?" "So I lit the lanterns," he nodded. "And I went into the storm. And I found you." Clara was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Do you believe in fate, Caleb?" "I used to believe in nothing. After Hannah and Samuel, I figured if there was a God, he was either cruel or absent. Neither option made me want to keep believing. And now," he thought about it, really thought. "Now I don't know. Maybe there's something out there, maybe there isn't, but I know one thing for certain." "What's that?" "Whatever brought you to my door that night, fate, luck, God, or just a brave little girl who refused to give up, I'm grateful for it. More grateful than I can say." Clara's eyes shimmered in the firelight. "So am I," she whispered. "So am I." The fire crackled. The baby made a soft sound. Outside, the wind had died down to a gentle whisper. And for the first time in 5 long years, Caleb Stone felt something he'd forgotten was possible. Peace. But peace, as he would soon learn, was never meant to last. Because Hector Bowen had a long memory and a short temper, and he wasn't done with Caleb Stone, not by a long shot. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later when Caleb rode back into town for medicine. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later when Caleb rode back into town for medicine. The baby had developed a cough. Nothing serious, Clara said, but she wanted something to ease his breathing. Caleb hadn't argued. He'd learned in the past 2 weeks that arguing with Clara Whitmore was like arguing with a mountain, pointless and exhausting. He tied Pepper outside the general store and pushed through the door. The store was fuller than last time. A dozen people milled about, examining goods, chatting in small clusters. The moment Caleb entered, every conversation stopped. He ignored the silence and walked to the counter. Hector Bowen stood behind it, his smile wide and ugly. "Mr. Stone, back so soon. Need medicine. Something for a baby's cough." "A baby." Hector made a show of searching through his shelves. "That'd be the Whitmore baby, I reckon. The one born in your cabin." Caleb didn't respond. "Funny thing about that baby," Hector continued loud enough for everyone to hear. "Born almost a month early, they say, right there in your kitchen. Just the 2 of you, alone." "There were 3 of us. Her daughter was there." "Ah, yes, the little girl." Hector set a small bottle on the counter. "Still, quite the situation. A widow and a widower alone in a cabin for weeks. People are bound to talk." "People can talk all they want." "Oh, they are." Hector leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "They're saying all kinds of things, Caleb. Some of them not very nice. Some of them wondering if that baby's really her dead husband's at all." Caleb's hand shot out and grabbed Hector's wrist. He squeezed, hard. "You want to repeat that?" Hector's face went pale, but his smile didn't waver. "I'm just telling you what folks are saying. Can't blame the messenger. I can blame whoever I want." Caleb released him and threw coins on the counter. "Keep the change, and keep your mouth shut." He grabbed the medicine and turned to leave. A woman blocked his path. Mrs. Pemberton, the preacher's wife. Gray-haired, thin-lipped, with eyes like chips of ice. "Mr. Stone." "Ma'am." "I hope you know what you're doing." Her voice carried across the store. "Taking in a strange woman. Letting her live under your roof. It sets a poor example for the community." "With respect, ma'am, what happens under my roof is none of the community's business." "Everything is the community's business. We have standards here. Morals. A single man and a single woman living together without the blessing of marriage, it's indecent." "She nearly died in a blizzard. Was I supposed to leave her in the snow?" "You were supposed to bring her to town, to the church, to somewhere proper. In the middle of a storm, with her in labor." Mrs. Pemberton's lips pressed thin. "There are always choices, Mr. Stone. You made yours. Now you'll have to live with the consequences." She stepped aside, letting him pass. But as he walked out, he heard her voice behind him, sharp and clear. "That poor woman, led astray by a man who should know better. I'll pray for her soul." Caleb kept walking. He didn't trust himself to speak. The ride home felt longer than usual. Every word he'd heard echoed in his head, poisoning the silence. He thought about Clara waiting on the porch, about Lucy playing in the yard, about the baby sleeping peacefully in his cradle. They deserved better than this. Better than whispers and judgment. Better than a town that would rather condemn than understand. But what could he do? He couldn't force people to be decent. Couldn't make them see Clara for who she really was, a brave woman who'd survived more than most of them could imagine. All he could do was protect her, shield her from the worst of it, and hope it would be enough. Clara was waiting when he arrived. She took one look at his face and knew. That bad. Worse. He told her everything. The whispers, Mrs. Pemberton's lecture, Hector's insinuations about the baby. Clara listened in silence. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "I expected this." "You did." "It's the same everywhere, Caleb. Small towns, big cities doesn't matter. A woman alone is always suspect. A woman alone with children is worse. People assume the worst because it's easier than asking questions. It's not right." "No, it's not." She sighed. "But it's the way things are. The question is, what we do about it." "What can we do?" Clara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "I could leave." Caleb's whole body went cold. "What?" "If I'm gone, the talk will stop. You can go back to your life. Your reputation." "I don't give a damn about my reputation." "You should. You live here. These are your neighbors, your community." "They haven't been my community in 5 years." He stepped closer, holding her gaze. "And I don't want you to leave. I don't want any of you to leave." Clara's eyes searched his face. "Why not?" "Because this house was dead before you came. I was dead. And now—" He struggled for words. "Now there's something worth waking up for. Something worth fighting for. I'm not giving that up because some small-minded fools can't see past their own noses." "Caleb, I mean it, Clara. Stay, please." She stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay, I'll stay." Relief flooded through him. "Good. But we do this my way." "What do you mean?" Clara straightened her shoulders. "I mean, I'm not hiding. I'm not cowering. If this town wants to judge me, they can do it to my face. Tomorrow, I'm going to church." Caleb blinked. "Church?" "Sunday service. I'm going to walk in there with my head held high, and I'm going to show them exactly who Clara Whitmore is." Her eyes flashed with determination. "They want to whisper. Let them whisper. But they'll do it while looking me in the eye." "Clara, that's brave, stupid, maybe both." She smiled grimly. "But it's better than hiding. Hiding lets them win. And I refuse to let people like Hector Bowen win." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to protect her from what was coming. But he saw the steel in her spine, the fire in her eyes, and he knew there was no changing her mind. "Then I'm coming with you." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He took her hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you won't face it alone. I promise." Clara looked down at their joined hands. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you, Caleb, for everything." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when we survive Sunday service." She laughed a small, surprised sound. "Deal." Sunday morning dawned cold and bright. Caleb dressed in his best clothes, a clean shirt, pressed trousers, his good boots. He hadn't worn them since Hannah's funeral. They felt strange, foreign, like they belonged to another man. Clara emerged from the bedroom wearing a simple blue dress she'd mended from scraps of fabric. Her hair was pinned up neatly, and she carried the baby wrapped in the flannel blanket. Lucy bounced beside her wearing a dress Clara had sewn from an old curtain. It was lopsided, and the hem was uneven, but Lucy wore it like it was made of silk. "Do I look pretty, Mr. Caleb?" "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Mama said we have to be brave today. She said some people might be mean, but we have to be brave anyway." "Your mama's right. I'm not scared." Lucy lifted her chin. "I'm never scared." Caleb crouched down to her level. "You know what I believe you." The ride into town felt like a march to battle. Caleb drove the wagon while Clara sat beside him, the baby in her arms. Lucy sat in the back, humming to herself. As they approached the church, Caleb saw the crowd gathered outside. Sunday service was the social event of the week. Everyone came, whether they believed or not. It was a chance to see and be seen, to catch up on news and gossip. Today Caleb knew they would be the gossip. He helped Clara down from the wagon. She took his arm, chin high, eyes forward. Together they walked toward the church doors. The whispers started immediately. "Is that her?" "The widow. From his cabin." "Look at that baby. Barely a month old." Shameless. Absolutely shameless. Clara kept walking. Her grip on Caleb's arm tightened, but her face remained calm. They reached the doors. Caleb pushed them open. Inside, the church was packed. Every pew was full, every seat taken. Faces turned toward them, some curious, some hostile, some carefully blank. Mrs. Pemberton sat in the front row. Her expression could have curdled milk. Caleb guided Clara to a pew near the back. They sat down. Lucy squeezed in beside them, her small hand finding Clara's. The service began. Reverend Pemberton was a thin, nervous man with a voice like dry leaves. He spoke about charity, about kindness, about loving thy neighbor. The irony wasn't lost on Caleb. Halfway through the sermon, the baby started to fuss. Clara tried to quiet him, but he only cried louder. Mrs. Pemberton turned around. Her gaze could have frozen fire. "Perhaps," she said loudly, "some people should know better than to bring infants to a house of worship." The church went silent. Clara's face flushed, but she didn't look away. "I apologize for the disruption. I'll take him outside." "Perhaps you should stay outside. This is a place for decent folk." The words hung in the air like a slap. Caleb started to rise, but Clara's hand on his arm stopped him. "Mrs. Pemberton," Clara said, her voice steady, "I mean no disrespect. I came here to worship same as everyone else." "Did you come to flaunt your shame?" Mrs. Pemberton stood, turning to face the congregation. "We all know what's been happening up on that ridge. A woman living with a man who isn't her husband. A baby born under his roof. And now she comes here to our church expecting us to pretend it's all proper and Christian." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "It ain't right," someone called out. "Scandal is what it is. Should be ashamed of herself." Clara stood slowly. Her face was pale, but her voice didn't waver. "You want to know the truth? Fine. I'll tell you the truth." The church went quiet. 6 months ago, my husband died in a mine collapse. He worked himself to death trying to provide for our family. 3 months after that, our house burned down. We lost everything. Everything. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. I was 8 months pregnant with a 6-year-old daughter and nowhere to go. I walked through a blizzard trying to find help. I collapsed in the snow, bleeding, dying. And my daughter, my brave, beautiful daughter, ran through that storm to find someone, anyone who could save us. Clara's eyes swept the congregation. She found Caleb Stone, a man you all abandoned, a man you left to rot in his grief because it was easier than reaching out. He could have turned us away. He could have let us die. But he didn't. He carried me through the snow. He delivered my baby with his own hands. He saved our lives. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. So yes, I've been living in his cabin. Because I had nowhere else to go. Because he was kind enough to take us in when no one else would. And if that makes me shameful in your eyes, then I'll wear that shame proudly. Because I know the truth, and so does God. She sat down. Her hands were shaking. No one spoke. Then a voice rang out high and clear and fierce. My mama is the bravest person in the whole world. Lucy had climbed onto the pew. She stood there small and defiant, her fists clenched at her sides. She walked through the snow when it was so cold I couldn't feel my feet. She told me to run and find help, even though she was hurting so bad, she never gave up. Not ever. Tears streamed down the little girl's face, but she didn't stop. And Mr. Caleb saved us. He carried Mama when she couldn't walk. He made sure my baby brother was born safe. He's good and kind, and you're all being mean to him for no reason. Her voice broke into a sob. Why are you being so mean? We didn't do anything wrong. We just wanted help. The church was frozen. No one moved. No one breathed. Then slowly, an old woman in the third row stood up. Widow Harrison, she was called. Her husband had died 20 years ago, and she'd raised 5 children alone. The child's right. Every head turned toward her. I remember when my Jeremiah passed. I remember how this town treated me. The whispers, the judgment, the men who thought a widow was easy prey. She looked at Mrs. Pemberton. I remember you, Martha, telling everyone I must have done something to deserve my hardship, that God was punishing me for some secret sin. Mrs. Pemberton's face went red. I never... You did. And I forgave you because that's what Christians do. But I won't stand by and watch you do it again. Widow Harrison walked to Clara and took her hand. Welcome to Silverbrook, Mrs. Whitmore. You and your children are welcome here. Another woman stood, then another, then a man near the back. She's right. This ain't Christian. This is just cruelty. I've known Caleb Stone for 30 years. He's a good man. Always has been. If he says she's decent, that's good enough for me. The tide was turning. Caleb could feel it. One by one, people were standing, speaking up, pushing back against the poison. Mrs. Pemberton looked around wildly. You can't be serious. You're going to take the word of a stranger over yours. Widow Harrison smiled grimly. Yes, Martha, we are. The Reverend finally found his voice. Perhaps we should all calm down. This is a house of God after all, a place of forgiveness and grace. Then maybe you should start practicing what you preach, someone called out. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara stood again. This time her eyes found Mrs. Pemberton's. I don't need your approval. I don't need anyone's approval. But my children deserve to grow up in a community that judges people by their actions, not their circumstances. She picked up the baby, took Lucy's hand. I hope someday this town can be that community. She walked down the aisle toward the door. Caleb followed his hand on the small of her back. As they passed Hector Bowen's pew, Caleb paused. Hector was sitting alone, his face twisted with fury. This isn't over, Stone, he hissed. Caleb leaned close. Yeah, it is. Because if you come near her again, if you spread one more lie, if you so much as look at her wrong, I'll make you regret the day you were born. Hector's face went pale. Caleb straightened and walked out into the sunlight. The ride home was quiet. Lucy fell asleep in the back of the wagon, exhausted from her outburst. The baby nursed peacefully in Clara's arms. The world seemed softer somehow, gentler. You were brave today, Caleb said finally. I was terrified. That's what makes it brave. Clara smiled. You said the same thing to Lucy once. It's the truth. I know. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Just for a moment. Thank you for standing with me. Always. The word hung between them. Always. A promise. A vow. Clara didn't pull away. Neither did Caleb. They rode home in comfortable silence, the winter sun warming their faces. But the peace was short-lived. That night Caleb woke to the smell of smoke. He bolted upright, heart pounding. Through the window he saw an orange glow in the distance. The barn. "Clara!" He was already pulling on his boots. "Clara, wake up!" She appeared in the doorway, the baby in her arms. "What is it?" "The barn's on fire. Stay here. Protect the children." He grabbed his coat and ran into the night. The barn was fully engulfed by the time he reached it. Flames roared through the old wood, sending sparks into the dark sky. Inside, the horses screamed. Caleb didn't hesitate. He plunged through the wall of heat, eyes streaming, lungs burning. He found Pepper first, wild-eyed and panicked. He grabbed her bridle and dragged her out, then went back for the others. 3 horses. He saved 3. The 4th, an old mare named Bessie, was trapped beneath a fallen beam. She was already gone. Caleb stumbled out of the barn as the roof collapsed. He fell to his knees in the snow, coughing, gasping for air. Clara was there. She wrapped a blanket around his shoulders, her face pale with fear. "Are you okay? Caleb, talk to me." "I'm fine." He wasn't. His hands were burned. His lungs felt like sandpaper, and there was a gash on his forehead from falling debris. "The horses, I got most of them out." "I don't care about the horses." Her hands cupped his face. "I care about you." He looked up at her. In the firelight, her eyes were fierce and bright. "It was Hector," he said. "It had to be. He did this." "We don't know that." "I know it." Rage burned in his chest, hotter than the flames behind him. "He burned your house in Helena. Now he's burning mine. He won't stop until he destroys everything." "Then we'll stop him." "How?" Clara's jaw set. "I don't know yet, but we will. Together." Behind them, the barn crumbled into ash. But as Caleb looked at Clara, at this woman who had survived so much, fought so hard, loved so fiercely, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt hope. And hope, he was learning, was the most dangerous thing of all. The barn smoldered for 3 days. Caleb worked through the wreckage, salvaging what he could. Tools, tack, a few scorched saddles. Most of it was gone. 40 years of his father's work. 20 years of his own. Reduced to ash and memory. Clara found him there on the 2nd day, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at nothing. "You haven't slept." "Can't." She sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "This isn't your fault." "Isn't it?" He laughed bitterly. "If I'd just kept to myself, if I hadn't taken you in, then I'd be dead. Lucy would be an orphan, and my son would never have been born." Clara's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare turn this into regret, Caleb Stone. Don't you dare." He looked at her, really looked, and saw something he hadn't expected. Anger. Not at Hector. At him. "I'm not regretting you," he said quietly. "I'm regretting that you got caught up in this. You've already lost so much, and now because of me, because of you, I'm alive. My children are alive. Everything else is just things." She took his burned hand in hers, gentle, despite the blisters. "Things can be rebuilt. People can't." "Clara, I mean it." She squeezed his hand. "We'll build a new barn. We'll buy new horses. We'll start over, together." Together. That word again. It kept coming up between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to name. "You're stubborn," he said. "So are you." "I noticed." She smiled. Just a small one, but it was enough. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Caleb was clearing debris when he heard hoofbeats. He looked up to see a wagon coming up the ridge, then another behind it, then a third. By the time they stopped in front of the ruined barn, there were 6 wagons and nearly 20 people. Caleb stood frozen, hammer in hand. Widow Harrison climbed down from the lead wagon. She was dressed in work clothes, her gray hair tied back with a practical scarf. "Well," she said, "you just gonna stand there gawking, or are you gonna help us unload? I don't understand." "Lumber." She pointed to the wagons. "Nails, tools, everything you need to build a new barn." She paused. "And some extra hands to help raise it." Caleb stared at the crowd. He recognized faces, some from the church, some from town. People who had whispered about him. People who had turned away. Now they were here. With supplies. Ready to work. Why? The word came out rough. After everything, why? A man stepped forward. Tom Bradley, the blacksmith. Big hands, honest face. Because we were wrong, Tom said simply. We let Hector Bowen poison this town with his lies. We let fear make us cruel. And that ain't who we are. He extended his hand. I'm sorry, Caleb, for all of it. Caleb looked at the hand, looked at the crowd behind it, then he took it. Thank you, he said. All of you. Don't thank us yet. Widow Harrison was already rolling up her sleeves. We got a barn to build, and I expect lunch. The work began. Men hauled lumber and hammered beams. Women cooked meals and watched children. Lucy ran between groups carrying water and collecting nails and chattering nonstop to anyone who would listen. Clara worked alongside Widow Harrison preparing food for the workers. At one point, Caleb saw them laughing together over something, their heads bent close. It struck him then how long it had been since he'd seen Clara laugh like that, open and free without the shadow of fear behind her eyes. This is what community looked like. This is what he'd forgotten in his years of isolation. People helping people. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. By nightfall, the frame of the new barn stood against the darkening sky. Tomorrow they'd add the walls, the day after the roof. Within a week it would be finished. Caleb stood looking at it, overwhelmed by gratitude he didn't know how to express. Clara appeared beside him. It's beautiful. It's just a frame. It's more than that. She slipped her hand into his. It's proof that people can change. That kindness can win. He looked down at their joined hands. Clara. Yes. I need to tell you something. She waited. When Hannah died, when I lost her and Samuel, I swore I'd never let myself care about anyone again. It hurt too much. Losing them broke something in me that I thought could never be fixed. His voice dropped to a whisper. But then you came. You and Lucy and the baby. And I felt it coming back. That part of me I thought was dead. It scared me, Clara. It still scares me. Caleb. Let me finish. He turned to face her. I know you've been through hell. I know you're not looking for another husband. And I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever you decide, I'm here. For you, for Lucy, for William. Always. Clara's eyes shimmered in the fading light. You mean that? I mean everything I say to you. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I was so scared when Thomas died. Not just of being alone, of being vulnerable, of needing someone and having them taken away. I built walls around myself, told myself I didn't need anyone, that I could do it all alone. She looked up at him. But you broke through those walls, Caleb Stone. You broke through with your grumpy silence and your kind heart and your stubborn refusal to let me die in that snow. A tear slipped down her cheek. I'm not ready for everything. Not yet. But I'm ready for something. For whatever this is. For us. Caleb's heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Us. Us. He cupped her face in his hands gently, so gently, mindful of his healing burns. Can I kiss you, Clara Whitmore? I thought you'd never ask. He kissed her. It was soft and sweet and over far too quickly. But when they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Well, Clara said, that was worth waiting for. Just wait till I'm properly healed. She laughed and swatted his arm. Caleb Stone. Is that appropriate talk? Probably not. He grinned. But I'm done being appropriate. I'm done being careful. I spent 5 years being careful, and all it got me was lonely. So what are you now? He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Happy. The peace lasted 3 more days. On the fourth day, Hector Bowen came to the ranch. Caleb saw him from the field, a lone rider approaching, dust rising behind him. He set down his tools and walked to meet him, positioning himself between Hector and the house. "You got nerve showing your face here." Hector dismounted slowly. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "I came to talk." "Nothing you have to say interests me." "It will." Hector's voice cracked. "It's about the fire." Caleb's hands curled into fists. "You admit it." "I didn't set it." Hector held up his hands. "I swear to God, Caleb, I didn't set that fire." "Then who did?" "My son." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. Marcus. He knew Hector's son. A sullen young man, 19 or 20, with his father's mean streak and none of his cunning. "Why?" "Because I'm a fool." Hector's voice broke. "I've been running my mouth for weeks, saying things, terrible things, about you, about Mrs. Whitmore, about anyone who defended you." He shook his head. Marcus heard it all. He thought he was doing right by me, defending our family's honor. By burning my barn, by nearly killing my horses. I didn't know he was going to do it. I swear I didn't know. Hector fell to his knees in the dirt. When I realized what he'd done, I couldn't believe it. My own son, a criminal, because of words I put in his head. Caleb stood over him, fury and confusion warring in his chest. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's the right thing to do." Hector looked up, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I know you won't believe me. I wouldn't believe me either. But I'm tired, Caleb. Tired of being angry. Tired of hurting people. Tired of watching everything I touch turn to poison. You destroyed Clara's life in Helena. You burned her house. I know. You spread lies that nearly turned this whole town against us. I know. Give me one reason why I shouldn't beat you within an inch of your life right now." Hector closed his eyes. "I can't. There isn't one. But I came here to tell you the truth, and to face whatever consequences you see fit. My son, he's waiting with the sheriff in town. Ready to confess, ready to pay for what he did. You turned in your own son? He committed a crime. He needs to answer for it." Hector's voice dropped to a whisper. "And maybe this will teach him something I never learned. That actions have consequences. That hatred destroys the hater most of all." Caleb didn't know what to say. He'd expected many things from Hector Bowen. Defiance, denial, more lies. Not this, not confession, not surrender. "Why Clara?" he asked finally. "Back in Helena. Why did you go after her?" Hector was silent for a long moment. "Because she rejected me. Because she saw through me." He shook his head. "When her husband died, I thought she'd be grateful. That she'd need someone to take care of her. But she looked at me like I was dirt. Like I was nothing. So you destroyed her." "I tried." Hector laughed bitterly. "But she survived. She kept surviving. No matter what I did, she just kept going. It drove me mad. How could she be so strong when I felt so weak? Because she's better than you." "I know." Hector met his eyes. "She's better than both of us." Clara's voice came from behind. "Caleb." He turned. She was standing on the porch, the baby in her arms. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "It's all right," he said. "He's not here to cause trouble." Clara walked toward them slowly. When she reached Hector, she stopped and looked down at him, still kneeling in the dirt. "I heard everything," she said quietly. Hector flinched. "Mrs. Whitmore, don't." Her voice was ice. "Don't apologize. Don't make excuses. I spent months afraid of you. Months looking over my shoulder, wondering when you'd strike next. You took my home, my peace, my sense of safety. I know. You don't know anything." Clara's voice shook with barely contained fury. "You don't know what it's like to watch your daughter ask why we have to keep running. You don't know what it's like to wake up screaming from nightmares about fire. You don't know anything. Hector bowed his head. Clara took a deep breath. Then another. But I refuse to let you poison me any longer. Hector looked up. Hate is heavy, Mr. Bowen. I've been carrying it for months and I'm tired. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of being afraid. She straightened her shoulders. So, I'm putting it down. Right here. Right now. Not for you, for me. For my children. For the life I want to build. I don't deserve forgiveness. No, you don't. Clara's voice softened slightly. But maybe your son does. Maybe he can be better than his father. Maybe this can be the moment everything changes for both of you. Hector stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Why would you, after everything I've done? Why would you give us that chance? Clara looked at Caleb. Something passed between them, an understanding, a shared memory. Because someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. She turned back to Hector. A stranger opened his door in the middle of a storm and saved my life. He didn't ask who I was or what I'd done. He just helped. She paused. I can't be that generous. Not yet. But I can choose not to destroy you the way you tried to destroy me. She held out her hand. Hector stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly he took it. Thank you, he whispered. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Go home, Mr. Bowen. Be with your son. Help him face what's coming. Clara released his hand. And then build something better. For both of you. Hector rose unsteadily to his feet. He looked at Caleb, then at Clara, then at the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. You're right, he said quietly. She is better than both of us. He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. That night, after Lucy had gone to sleep and William was settled in his cradle, Caleb and Clara sat on the porch together. The stars were out bright and countless against the dark sky. The air was cold, but not bitter. Spring was coming. You surprised me today, Caleb said. I surprised myself. I wanted to hurt him. When he was kneeling there confessing, I wanted to make him pay for everything he'd done to you. I know. But you stopped me. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. Not stopped. Redirected. There's a difference. Is there? Hurting him wouldn't have fixed anything. It would have just added more pain to a situation already drowning in it. She sighed. I learned that the hard way after Thomas died. I was so angry at God, at the mine company, at the world. I wanted someone to blame, someone to punish. That's natural. Maybe. But it was also eating me alive. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't be the mother Lucy needed. She paused. One day I realized I had a choice. I could keep holding on to that anger until it destroyed me, or I could let it go and focus on what mattered. My daughter, my unborn child, the life I still had to live. That's when you decided to leave Helena. That's when I decided to start over. The fire just accelerated things. Caleb took her hand. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I don't feel strong. That's how I know you are. She turned to look at him. In the starlight, her eyes were deep and luminous. Caleb? Yeah. I want to tell you something. I'm listening. Clara took a breath. When Lucy found your cabin that night, when she came back and told me a man was going to help us, I didn't believe her. I thought she was hallucinating. Or lying to make me feel better. Because in my experience, people don't help. They take. They use. They leave. Clara, let me finish. She squeezed his hand. But then you came. You carried me through that storm like I weighed nothing. You delivered my baby with your own hands. You held my family together when we were falling apart. Her voice broke. And you asked for nothing. Nothing at all. I didn't do it for... I know. That's what makes it so remarkable. She touched his face. You did it because it was right. Because that's who you are. And I've spent the last month falling in love with exactly who you are. Caleb's heart stopped. You love me. I love you. Clara smiled through her tears. Is that okay? He couldn't speak. Couldn't find words big enough to hold what he was feeling. So instead, he kissed her. This kiss was different from the first. Deeper. Hungrier. Full of everything they'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. I love you too, Caleb said. I think I've loved you since the moment I opened that door and saw Lucy standing there. I just didn't know it yet. You're a slow learner. I'm getting better. Clara laughed and pulled him close. They sat there together, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars wheel overhead. Caleb. What happens now? He thought about it. About the barn rising from the ashes. About the town that had rallied around them. About the little girl who had knocked on his door and changed everything. Now, he said, we build a life. Just like that. Just like that. He kissed the top of her head. You, me, Lucy, William. A family. A home. Everything we thought we'd lost. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she whispered, I never thought I'd have this again. Neither did I. But we do. We do. She tilted her face up to his. Then let's not waste it. Never, he promised. Not a single day. The stars shone down on them bright and eternal. And somewhere in the house a baby stirred, and a little girl dreamed, and a future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago became suddenly beautifully real. Spring arrived in Silverbrook like a promise kept. The snow melted slowly, revealing patches of brown earth that turned green within weeks. Wildflowers pushed through the frozen ground. Birds returned to the trees. The world woke up from its long winter sleep. And so did Caleb Stone. He rose each morning before dawn, not out of habit or grief, but out of anticipation. There was work to do. A ranch to rebuild. A family to care for. A life to live. The new barn stood tall against the morning sky, its wood still pale and fresh. Inside, 4 horses nickered softly as Caleb brought them their feed. Pepper, the stubborn gray mare who had carried him through the storm, bumped her nose against his shoulder. Easy girl, I haven't forgotten you. He heard footsteps behind him and smiled before he even turned around. You're up early, Clara said. Could say the same about you. She walked toward him, William bundled against her chest in a cloth sling. The baby was 3 months old now, growing stronger every day. His dark hair had thickened, and his eyes had settled into a deep brown, just like his mother's. Couldn't sleep, Clara admitted. Too much on my mind. Good things or bad things? Good things. She smiled. Mostly. Caleb set down the feed bucket and pulled her close, careful not to squish the baby between them. Tell me. The town council met yesterday, while you were in the field. And they offered me the teaching position. Caleb's face split into a grin. Clara, that's wonderful. It's not much money, and the schoolhouse needs repairs, and half the children in this town have never held a book in their lives. She laughed. But it's a start. It's more than a start. It's everything you wanted. Almost everything. Sure. She looked up at him, something unreadable in her eyes. There's one more thing. Name it. Clara hesitated. In the 3 months since that first kiss, they'd been careful with each other, patient, taking things slow, building trust, letting their relationship grow naturally. But Caleb could see something different in her face today, something resolute. I've been thinking about what you said, that night on the porch, about building a life together. I remember. Did you mean it? All of it. Every word. Clara took a breath. Then I have a question for you, Caleb Stone. His heart started pounding. I'm listening. Will you marry me? The world stopped. Caleb stared at her, certain he'd misheard. What did you just say? I asked if you'd marry me. Clara's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. I know it's not traditional. I know the man is supposed to ask. But I've spent my whole life waiting for things to happen to me, and I'm done waiting. I love you. Lucy loves you. William will grow up thinking you're his father, whether we make it official or not. So why wait? Clara? If you need time to think about it, I understand. I'm not trying to pressure you, Caleb kissed her. He kissed her until she stopped talking, until her arms wrapped around his neck, until William squeaked in protest at being squished between them. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathless. Is that a yes? Clara asked. That's a yes. He cupped her face in his hands. That's the biggest yes I've ever given in my life. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Really? Really? He wiped them away with his thumb. I was going to ask you, you know. I've been carrying my mother's ring in my pocket for 2 weeks trying to find the right moment. Clara laughed through her tears. You have a ring? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a simple gold band with a tiny diamond at its center. It was my mother's, and her mother's before that. It's not much, but it's perfect. Clara held out her hand. Put it on me. Caleb slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had been waiting for her all along. There, he said softly. Now it's official. Clara stared at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. We're getting married. We're getting married. I can't believe it. Neither can I. He pulled her close again. But I'm glad. So glad, Clara. Me too. She pressed her face against his chest. Me too. The wedding took place 3 weeks later, on the first truly warm day of spring. They held it at the ranch in the meadow behind the house, where wildflowers had begun to bloom. The whole town came, or at least everyone who mattered. Widow Harrison sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Tom Bradley stood as Caleb's best man, his massive blacksmith's hands trembling as he held the rings. Even Reverend Pemberton officiated, though his wife had declined to attend. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. Lucy served as flower girl, scattering petals with more enthusiasm than precision. She wore a white dress Clara had sewn by hand with ribbons in her hair and a smile that could light up the darkest night. Do I look pretty, Mr. Caleb? She'd asked that morning. The prettiest, he'd told her. Second only to your mama. Now standing at the altar with spring sunshine warming his face, Caleb watched Clara walk toward him on Widow Harrison's arm. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, nothing fancy, but to him, she looked like an angel. Dearly beloved, Reverend Pemberton began, we are gathered here today. Caleb barely heard the words. He was too busy looking at Clara, at the woman who had stumbled into his life on the worst night of her existence, and somehow made every day since then better. Do you, Caleb Stone, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. The words came out strong and sure. And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Her voice trembled, but her smile was radiant. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Pemberton smiled. You may kiss the bride. Caleb didn't need to be told twice. The reception lasted until sunset. Tables had been set up in the yard loaded with food that the townspeople had brought. There was music. Old Pete Morrison had brought his fiddle, and Tom Bradley's wife played the harmonica. People danced and laughed and ate until they couldn't eat anymore. Lucy ran wild with the other children, her flower girl dress already grass-stained and torn at the hem. William passed from arm to arm, admired by every woman in attendance. At one point, Caleb found himself standing apart from the crowd, watching it all with a sense of wonder he couldn't quite name. Clara appeared beside him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking this doesn't feel real. It is real. I know. He shook his head. But 6 months ago I was sitting in a dark cabin waiting to die. And now you have a wife, 2 children, and a town full of people who came to celebrate with you. It's a lot to take in. Clara slipped her hand into his. You deserve it, Caleb. Every bit of it. So do you. I know. She smiled up at him. We both do. As the sun set and the stars came out, the guests began to leave. They said their goodbyes with hugs and handshakes, promises to visit soon, congratulations that seemed genuinely felt. Finally, only the family remained. Lucy had fallen asleep on a blanket in the grass. William dozed in his cradle, full and content. Clara and Caleb sat on the porch steps, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Mrs. Stone," Caleb said, testing the words. Clara laughed. "That's going to take some getting used to." "I like it." "So do I." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Caleb, thank you." "For what?" "For opening your door that night. For carrying me through the storm. For everything that came after." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "For giving me a home when I thought I'd never have one again." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Can I tell you something? Anything. When Hannah and Samuel died, I thought my life was over. I thought there was nothing left worth living for. I spent 5 years in that darkness, Clara. 5 years of silence and grief and wishing I'd died with them." Clara squeezed his hand. "But then Lucy knocked on my door, and everything changed." He turned to look at her. "You didn't just give me a family, Clara. You gave me a reason to exist, a purpose, a future I never thought I'd have." "Caleb, I'm not finished." He took her face in his hands. "I loved Hannah. I'll always love her. She was my first love, and nothing will ever change that. But you," his voice cracked, "you're my second chance, my miracle. And I promise you, Clara Stone, I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret walking through that storm to find me." Tears streamed down Clara's face. "I could never regret that. Not ever." "I know." He kissed her forehead. "But I'm going to prove it anyway." They sat there in the darkness, holding each other, as the stars wheeled overhead, and the world settled into peaceful silence. 1 year later, life had found its rhythm. The ranch had expanded. New fences marked wider pastures. A chicken coop sat beside the barn. A vegetable garden grew behind the house. What had once been a place of grief and isolation was now bursting with life. Clara's school thrived. Children came from miles around their faces, eager, their minds hungry for learning. She taught them reading, writing, arithmetic. But she also taught them kindness, patience, and the value of second chances. "Everyone deserves to be believed in," she told them. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow." Lucy had grown 3 inches and lost 2 teeth. She was 7 now, confident and curious with her mother's fire and her stepfather's stubborn streak. She called Caleb Papa without hesitation, and he answered to it with a joy that still caught him off guard. William was running more accurately into everything he could find. His first word had been horse, which delighted Caleb to no end. His second word had been Lucy, which delighted Lucy even more. "He loves me best," she announced regularly. "He loves everyone," Clara would correct her. "But me most." There was no arguing with that logic. On a warm summer evening, the family gathered for dinner on the porch. It had become their tradition eating outside, when the weather allowed, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. "Papa," Lucy said between bites of cornbread, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever miss being alone?" Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. "What?" "Before we came, when you lived by yourself." Lucy's face was serious, the way children's faces get when they're asking questions that matter. "Mama said you were sad before, that you didn't have anyone. Do you miss that?" Clara started to intervene, but Caleb held up a hand. "That's a good question, Lucy. And you deserve an honest answer." He set down his cup and turned to face her fully. "No, I don't miss it. Not even a little bit." "Really? Really?" He smiled. Being alone was easy in some ways. I didn't have to worry about anyone else. Didn't have to be brave for anyone. Didn't have to feel anything. He paused. But that's not living, sweetheart. That's just surviving. And there's a big difference. What's the difference? Surviving means you wake up every day. Living means you have a reason to. He reached out and tugged one of her braids gently. You're my reason, Lucy. You and your mama and your brother. You're my reason for everything. Lucy's eyes went bright with tears. She launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. I love you, Papa. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. Clara watched them, her own eyes shimmering. When Lucy finally let go and returned to her dinner, Clara reached across the table and took Caleb's hand. You're getting better at this, she said softly. At what? Being happy. He laughed. I had good teachers. After dinner, Caleb went for a walk. It was something he did every evening now, a loop around the property, checking fences, watching the sunset, thinking about nothing and everything. Tonight, his feet carried him up the hill. To the graves. Hannah and Samuel's markers stood weathered but upright, their names still visible in the fading light. Caleb had planted flowers around them last spring. They bloomed now bright and cheerful. Hey, he said softly. It's me. The wind rustled through the grass. No answer, of course. There never was. I brought someone new to the family. Well, 3 someones, actually. Clara, Lucy, and William. He paused. I think you'd like them, Hannah. Clara's stubborn as a mule and twice as smart. Lucy's brave as anything. And William, he reminds me of Samuel sometimes. The way he laughs. The way he gets into everything. His voice cracked. I never thought I'd feel this way again. After you died, I thought that part of me was gone forever. But it wasn't. It was just sleeping. Waiting. He wiped his eyes. I hope you're not angry. I hope you understand. The wind picked up gentle and warm, like a caress, like a blessing. I'll always love you, Caleb whispered. Both of you. But I have to keep living. I have to keep moving forward. It's what you would have wanted. He stood there for a long moment, letting the peace wash over him. Then he turned and walked back down the hill. Clara was waiting on the porch, just like Hannah used to. But this time, he wasn't walking toward his past. He was walking toward his future. Everything okay? Clara asked as he climbed the steps. Everything's perfect. She studied his face, reading the emotions there. You went to see them. I did. What did you tell them? Caleb sat down beside her and pulled her close. That I'm ready to let go. Not of the memories, I'll never let go of those. But of the grief, the guilt, the belief that I don't deserve to be happy. Clara pressed her lips to his cheek. And are you ready? I think so. He looked at her. I think I've been ready for a while. I just needed permission. Whose permission? Theirs. He nodded toward the hill. And mine. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft. When Thomas died, I felt like I'd never be whole again. Like a part of me had been ripped away and nothing could fill the hole. She paused. But I was wrong. The hole doesn't get filled, it gets surrounded. By new love, new family, new reasons to keep going. That's beautiful. It's true. She turned to face him fully. You didn't replace Hannah Caleb. And I didn't replace Thomas. We built something new, something different, something that honors who we were while celebrating who we've become. Caleb felt tears prick his eyes. How did I get so lucky? You weren't lucky. You were brave. Clara smiled. You opened your door in the middle of a storm when you could have stayed safe in the dark. That's not luck. That's courage. It was instinct. Same thing sometimes. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Mama, Papa? Lucy's voice rang out from inside the house. William's trying to eat a bug again. Clara laughed and rose to her feet. Duty calls. I'll be right there. She kissed the top of his head and went inside, her laughter mixing with Lucy's protests and William's delighted squeals. Caleb stayed on the porch a moment longer. He looked out at the ranch, at the barn he'd rebuilt with his neighbor's help, at the garden growing strong, at the light spilling from the windows of a house that was finally a home. He thought about the night that had changed everything. A knock at midnight. A little girl in the snow. A woman dying in the dark. He'd lit every lantern that night. Every single one. And somehow, impossibly, those lights had guided him out of the darkness he'd been living in for 5 years. Now the lanterns stayed lit. Not because he needed them to find his way, but because he wanted the world to see. This house was alive again. This family was whole. This man had found his way home. Caleb stood and walked to the door. Inside, Clara was wiping something suspicious off William's face, while Lucy supervised with the authority of a 7-year-old general. "Did you get it?" Lucy demanded. "Was it a beetle? I bet it was a beetle." "I don't want to know what it was," Clara said firmly. "I just want it gone." "Beetles are crunchy," Lucy informed her. "Charlie Morrison told me. He ate one on a dare." "Charlie Morrison is going to have a conversation with his mother." Caleb stepped into the warmth and the chaos and the love. "Need help?" "Always." Clara handed him the squirming toddler. "Your son, I believe." "My son." He lifted William high, making the boy shriek with laughter. "Yeah, I like the sound of that." "Papa, can I stay up late?" Lucy asked. "It's almost summer, and the sun's still out, and—" "Nice try," Clara said. "Bed in 30 minutes." "But Mama, 29 minutes now." Lucy huffed dramatically and stomped toward her room, muttering about the injustice of bedtimes. Caleb and Clara exchanged a look. The kind of look that said everything words couldn't. This is our life now. This is our family. This is everything. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Caleb and Clara sat together by the fire. "Happy?" she asked. "The happiest I've ever been." "Me too." She curled against his side. Caleb. Thank you for lighting those lanterns." He smiled and kissed her hair. "Thank Lucy for knocking." Outside, the summer wind whispered through the trees. The stars blazed overhead, and on the porch of the Stone family ranch, a single lantern burned steady and bright. It had a name now. Lucy had given it one that first spring, when the snow finally melted, and hope seemed possible again. She'd called it Hope. And hope, as it turned out, was exactly what it was. One knock had changed everything. One moment of courage in the darkest hour. One man who chose to answer. And in the end, that was all it took. A door opened, a hand extended, a heart willing to try again. Because even in the coldest winter, even in the deepest grief, even when all seems lost and the darkness feels eternal, light finds a way, love finds a way, and hope once kindled never truly dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to strike the match.